Thank you for tuning into the Pastor Finkley podcast. This podcast is designed to bring spiritual enrichment and enlightenment and instruction to the life of the believer. Pastor Finkley, with his revelatory teaching and insightful insight into the Word of God, takes us deeper into the richness that is found in God's Word. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the Pastor Finkley podcast. Without further delay, let's join Pastor Finkley for this insightful teaching. God bless you, family. This is Pastor A.D. Finkley, your host of the Pastor Finkley podcast. And hey, my dear friends, I pray that life is being a blessing to you and that you are experiencing the full favor of Almighty God. And that, listen, you're enjoying life. The life that we have, we're only given one on this side. And so we know that we are going to all live forever. But listen, I believe that it's important that we enjoy the life that we have here now on this side. That's right. I said it, on this side. And so, my friends, you know, we have a special podcast that we're going to be presenting today. As a matter of fact, I think that I may just have to do this in 2 sessions because I don't think that 30 minutes is going to be long enough for me to kind of dig into this. It is a controversial topic, but in honor of Black history, I think that we not only need to look and in retrospect and be amazed and supportive and excited about the things that have transpired in the past to bring us to the place that we are now. But also, you know, there's some challenges in which I think we have to address going forward. And so on this particular podcast, it's the Black History Edition. We're going to talk about it. That's right. We're going to talk about it. And so, listen, I'm not going to delay the program, but I'm going to jump right in so that we could utilize the time that we have together. Listen, friends, I'm going to tell you, I don't believe that there's any race on the planet Earth that's like the African American. And when I say the African American, now I'm speaking about the blacks who have been raised here, birthed here, brought here to America. You know, I'm going to say it up front. There's absolutely no race on the planet. I know that there are Africans who stay in Africa, and there's some beautiful and wonderful people, but there's no other people on the planet Earth like the American African, the African that is here in America, born, raised, and bred, came from the history of American slavery. There's no other race. There's no other race of people on the earth like that particular group. And listen, the reason in which I say that is because we are, as African Americans, we are the most gifted. We are the most talented. Listen, you can, you know, I'm serious, man. We in the entire world, you can't find Black people who are gifted and talented. I mean, just raw gifted talent like you can find in the African American race here in America. I mean, you know, there's, as I said just before, there's blacks all over the world, or there's Africans all over the world, or Hamites, however you want to put it, they're all over the world. But there is absolutely none like here in America. And to be quite honest, if we would just sit back and observe, we would see that everybody, every other nationality, every other nation tries their best to mimic the giftedness and the talent of the African American. And when you think in terms of our singing ability, our oratory ability, our physical ability, regardless of whatever sport it is, whether it's football, basketball, or even if it's boxing, these types of things, nobody in the world is skilled and just rawly gifted like we are as a people. And so, you know, you think in terms of singing, you think in terms of the way in which rap has stepped in and transformed the world. I'm not saying that there's not other good rappers from other nationalities, but none have had such an impact on culture like the African American. You don't find people in Venezuela rapping like you find people in Chicago or right here in our own city here, Winston-Salem. Winston-Salem. That's where I'm at, and so you don't find those types of gifts and talents. And so before we get into any of this, I want to take some time and just salute the African American, the African American, those who have their families and generations right here in America. The descendants of slaves is what I'm speaking of. The descendants of slaves. I just want to salute us as a people, because we have such a precious gift and gem given to us in so many facets, in so many ways, that has just simply come from God. And I wholeheartedly believe, I'm going to go on record and say this, I wholeheartedly believe that much of the giftedness and the just raw talent that you see amongst this people group comes from the fact that we as a people, I'm not saying my generation, I'm not saying my mother's generation, but definitely a portion of my grandmother's generation and the generation before her has come through such difficulty and hardship until that difficulty and hardship in life produced this in the descendants of those slaves and those who went through the Reconstruction as well as the Jim Crow era. And so I know that we still have some problems today, and there's still some things that need to be resolved. And listen, perhaps they may never be resolved. But I just wanted to take this moment here before we got into this, because it's going to take a turn here in a minute. But I just wanted to say that I salute the African American. I still love my brothers from another mother. OK, so don't my Spanish brothers, I still love you. My Caucasian brothers, I still love you. My Chinese brothers, my Laotian brothers, I still love you. But, it's Black History Month. And so I'm just saluting the African American. Big up to you. I know that's a little, reggae term, big up, but pastor's cool in some aspects. You understand what I'm saying? And so I just wanted to go ahead and salute the African American. Salute. There's greatness a lot within us, but there's some things that we certainly have to address. And so, when you think about the African American, those who were brought here, not by choice, but by force within slavery, it takes great resilience. And I know that sometimes we look at some of the films that are made depicting the slavery. But let me tell you something. No movie, absolutely no movie, as good as they are, as interesting as they are, no movie can really give you a true picture of what really took place. That's right. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. There's no movie that can give you a real depiction of what took place. Quite frankly, many of the things that took place, we just couldn't even fathom. You understand what I'm saying? We couldn't fathom that those particular things took place. And here it is, my friend, to see that we survived as a people, through that, just slavery itself. Now, we're not going to talk about necessarily the Reconstruction, because we're not necessarily doing a great history report. We're just going to kind of walk through this to kind of get us up to where we're going with this particular podcast. But there's some things that took place during slavery that we will never be able to even fathom. We couldn't even wrap our minds around what it was like, what these people really endured, how there was a great attempt to break them spiritually and physically and mentally. And I'm telling you, quite frankly, in some aspects, we're still wrestling with some of the thought patterns that was ingrained into the slave. And so, to live through that, to see us come through that, I mean, that is just something that certainly needs to be commended. That's right. It just certainly needs to be absolutely commended. But not only did we as a people survive, slavery itself, but upon becoming, quote unquote, so-called free, and I'm going to use that word, that's my terminology. I'm not saying that I got that out of a book, but it was so-called free because when we came out of slavery, as we remember, we came out of slavery with nothing. That's right. We had nothing. We were slaves. And so even though we were free, we were free to, supposedly free to be able to go where we wanted to go and do what we wanted to do. But we had nothing to do what we wanted to do with. We had absolutely nowhere to go. And you understand, as a people, we had nowhere to go. We had absolutely nothing that we could honestly do, especially those slaves that were in the South. We could get all deep into that, but this is not a history report, and so we're just talking. And so not only did these people or this people group survive the slavery, but then when becoming free, you had a thing called the Reconstruction. And the Reconstruction was a revamping of things, so to speak, to adjust for these newly free slaves. But here in the South, now I can't speak much about the North, but I can say here in the South, the Reconstruction was really just slavery up under a different name. In other words, there were different types of laws that were put into place to ensure that a slave remained in a slave place, even though, quote unquote, they were supposedly free. And so here we survived through the Reconstruction. And here it is. I mean, a people of resilience is what we are. And so we survived through the Reconstruction. And then you get into segregation has always been there during this time. But then you would have this thing called Jim Crow laws, these laws that were put into place that, boy, I'm telling you, Jim Crow was something rough. And, you have to go and do your research and your history on those types of things. But we survived through all of those things is what I'm trying to say. And after surviving through those things, we became such a great and mighty people. That's right. I mean, we became such a great and mighty people because it was during this time that these Jim Crow laws were in the place and segregation was in the place. I mean, we thrived like never before as a people. I wasn't born in that particular time, but I did do some light research on that. My mother lived during that time. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, my mother was a part of the first class in her town that was desegregated. The desegregation happened, I believe, when she was a senior. I have to go back and look at the video, but I was able to record her giving the testimony of what took place during that first school year of desegregation. But here it is. Prior to this desegregation, we thrived as a people. And quite frankly, we had our own businesses. We had our own banks. We had our own dentist office. We had our own doctors. I mean, we had our own repair shops. We had our own car dealers. The Black community, the African-American community thrived greatly during this particular time. And so any kind of service that you needed at that time, it came from someone who looked just like you. We were entrepreneurs. We were thriving. And could you imagine the kind of people who survived this stint with slavery, survived this stint with the Reconstruction, survived this stint with Jim Crow laws, and survived this stint with segregation and thrived while we were doing it? This is why I said that African-American people definitely should be saluted just for the ability to be able to survive with all odds against them. We have something built into us, friends, that has been passed down. I mean, from our ancestors. We are descendants of survivors. Oh, my God. I'm not going to preach because, as I said, this conversation is going to turn here in just a minute. But here it is. It's during this time that we thrive in such a great way. But there was a turning along in there. I know we experienced this great civil rights victory in the desegregation being passed and blacks, being able to be in the same school, eat in the same restaurants, up under the leadership of Martin Luther King. I understand that took place and there were some tremendous things that happened. But when we step back and we think about it, we think about all of these great victories and the things in which we celebrate. We have to look at and ask the question today, how in the world did we go from that to what we have now? In other words, I'm speaking in terms of how did we go from this place of thriving in society as the African American people? How do we go from this place of thriving in business, thriving in home ownership, thriving in education, in so many areas, thriving in all of these areas until we got to the place that we are now? We've got to ask that question. If we're going to be honest, how did we get here? This is the reason in which we're having this particular discussion, is because we want to answer some of these questions. Now, I know that everybody may not agree with all my answers, but even though if you don't agree with my answers, you have to take what I say and what I'm going to say into some level of consideration. Over the past years, ever since we have reached that level of great success as a people, there's been something that has been eating at us as a people and as a culture, and it's the thing called fatherlessness. Seeing that we thrived so well, seeing that we were able to do so much as a people, but now in the 21st century, we find ourselves dealing with all different types of challenges. There are a new set of challenges in which we're dealing with. And quite frankly, my friends, I'm going to share it with you that I believe personally that there is absolutely no greater challenge in which we're facing in the 21st century than the challenge of fatherlessness. This is an issue within the African American community. As talented as we are, as gifted as we are, as resilient as we are, as creative as we are, with all of the raw talent that we possess, one of the greatest issues that we face in the 21st century is the issue of fatherlessness. In other words, when I speak in terms of fatherlessness, I'm speaking in terms of the fact that 80% of our families, 80% of our families are ran by single mothers. In other words, our young men are having babies with our daughters, and yet they're not marrying them. And as a result of them not marrying them, our children are growing up without the presence of their father in their life. And if there's anything that's detrimental to our family structure, if there's anything that's detrimental to our people as a people, it is the whole ideal of fatherlessness. You'll be surprised if you stop and took a minute to talk to some of your coworkers that are of African American descent and just simply ask them, what kind of relationship do you have with your father? I can guarantee you, that's right, I'm willing to bet on it. I can guarantee you that the majority of the individuals in which you speak with, the majority of individuals which you question, the majority of the individuals in which you talk to will tell you, I either have a fragmented relationship with my father or I don't have a relationship at all. And let me tell you something, that is quite sad. And the reason that is sad is because when you look at the Chinese race or the Asian race, or when you look at the Latinos, or when you look at the Caucasians, you find for the greater portion, you find that their family structure is intact. In other words, their fathers are still with their mothers. That's right, their fathers are still with their mothers. But when you look at the African American, when you look at us, that's right, I said us, what you discover is simply this, is that we are suffering from fatherlessness. Our young men are not involved in the lives of the children. And let me tell you something. I'm going to say it again. You're going to hear me. You're going to hear me say this time and time again. But whenever the father is not involved in the life of the children, not only do the children suffer, but that mother suffers. And quite frankly, we as a people suffer. And if we're going to ever rise back to that level of prominence within the earth, then the African American must address the fatherless issue. That's right. It must address the fatherless issue. And so here it is, friends. You don't have to believe me. All you got to do is go to the CDC, the Census Bureau, and you can pull the statistic and the math yourself. As I said just a minute ago, 80% of our homes are ran by single mothers. That's way over half. No other nationality in the world has 80% of the homes ran by single mothers. And let me tell you something. I feel for our single mothers. I really do. I think they're doing a tremendous job with what they have. You understand what I'm saying? You know, some people like to give single mothers a hard time, but let me tell you something. They're doing the best they can with what they got. That's right. I'm going to say it again. They're doing the best they can with what they got. And I salute these single mothers. Lord knows I salute you, single mother, because listen, it took two to make the baby. But unfortunately, what we're finding is the majority of our women are raising their children by themselves. And whenever this comes into play, let me tell you how detrimental this is to us as a people. Whenever that comes into play where there's a single mother, she is 10 times more likely to live in poverty. Because let me tell you, it's hard to work a full-time job with a baby. And I know some people say, well, you can put the baby in daycare. Well, let me tell you something, friend. If you're only making $24,000 a year, and quite frankly, in the 21st century, in 2023, $24,000 a year ain't no money. $30,000 a year is not $32,000 a year. With the cost of living being what it is now, that's no money a year. And so whenever that woman has to raise a youngin', I said a youngin', that's a little old school, right? But whenever that young lady has to raise that child on her own, if she's making $24,000, $25,000, $26,000, $24,500 a year is poverty in America. And quite frankly, I'll go as far and say that I believe is deep poverty because it's hard to survive off that kind of money. That's right, in America. But here it is. Whenever she has to do this on her own, you said, well, put him in daycare. Do you not know how much daycare costs? I mean, man, I'm telling you, I told a friend of mine, I said, I'm in the wrong business. He told me he was paying like $500 a week. And it was a husband and a wife. And he was saying, man, I'm so glad them children out of daycare. And so I could only imagine what a single mother is having to pay and the way she's having to rob Peter and pay Paul in order to keep those kids in daycare. And without a strong support system being in place. Oh, that's another thing. Without a support system being in place, you know, the whole issue gets even more demanding. And so here it is. 80% of our homes are ran by single mothers. And the question we got to ask is, where are the fathers? Where are the fathers of these children? Because it's fatherlessness that's killing us. Let me tell you something, friend. I was speaking to a gentleman and I said, you'll be surprised at how many young men and young girls have never had their father tell them that they love them. You know, I'll speak of myself. I'm talking to myself. You know, my father was in my life as a kid. And then my mother had to divorce my father. He had his reasons for why he was doing what he was doing. And I'm not here to bash him. I'm not mad at him. I'm not talking about him because I understand that it may have been difficult for him to be a father to me because he did not have his father in his life. And so, you know, the men learn from other men. And so if he didn't have that role modeled in front of him, then perhaps maybe he lacked some of the key skills that would have been needed in order to be the father that definitely me and my sister needed at the time. You understand what I'm saying? What I'm saying to you is simply this, is that you'll be surprised at how many kids are walking around. Father never told them they love them. Never. They never heard. Listen, they never heard daddy say, I love you, boy. I'll go as far as that. You'll be surprised at how many people have never held. I'm talking about grown men, grown African-American men. You'll be surprised at how many men have never heard their father say, I am proud of you. Come on, you'll be surprised. Some people have never heard them say, I am proud of you. As a matter of fact, for many of these children, their father never ever claimed them. Oh, he ain't mine. No, good and well he yours. Boy, look just like you. Look like all your people. And listen, men, I'm not bashing you. Lord knows I'm not. Because there are good fathers. There are upstanding, upright fathers, dependable men that can be counted on, that the family, sticks with the mother, supports the family. Even if them and the mother is not together, they still support the family. And I know sometimes the sisters won't allow these men to be in the lives of their children. I understand that. I understand it. So this is not a male bashing podcast, but we're talking about the issue of fatherlessness and the effect in which it has on such a great people, such as ourselves. And so when you have this issue of fatherlessness, people want to know, why are we having such an issue with gangs? In the African-American community, it's fatherlessness. That's where it's coming from. Why we got such an issue with drug dealing? It's fatherlessness. There you go, friend. It's fatherlessness. Because when the father has an active role, I'm not saying that children don't go left with fathers, but I'm telling you, they're less likely to go left with an involved father in their life than a father that's not involved. Because a lot of times he's doing what he saw daddy do. And if he saw daddy get up and go to work and love mama, 9 times out of 10, when he run into somebody, he going to get up and go to work and love his wife. Because that's what was modeled in front of him. You understand what I'm saying? It's about what's modeled in front of them. And when fatherlessness is in the place, there's nothing being modeled. You know what's being modeled? It's nothing being modeled in the home. And I'm not saying that mama's a bad woman. Mama could be the best mama in the world. But that young man is picking his cues up from the kid that's up on the block, standing on the corner with the gold teeth and the chain and the nice ride. That's what he's seeing modeled in front of him. What he's seeing modeled in front of him, he's seeing modeled in front of him his latest rapper. That's what he's seeing modeled in front of him. And since he's seeing those things modeled in front of him, that's the model that he is going to shape himself after, because there is no father there. And so, I think we have to address this particular issue, because there's a tendency for us sometimes to jump all over this thing rather than deal with the real issue at hand. And the real issue at hand is the fact that we are suffering from an issue of fatherlessness. And, so sometimes I sit back and I watch these particular meetings that the police department have and these other wonderful groups have, and they're coming together and they're trying to brainstorm and say, well, maybe we can create some programs. Maybe we can throw some more money at it. But listen, this is not a money issue. That's right. I want to say it again. I want you to hear me good. This is not a money issue. This is an issue with fatherlessness. And so if there's anything that needs to be said, and listen, I don't have the platform to say it. Lord knows I don't. If I did have the platform to say it, I would say it. The real issue at hand is that someone needs to say, fathers, get involved in the lives of your sons. We're tired of burying our boys. And I mean, they're getting younger and younger and younger and younger. We are tired of burying these young men. Do you hear what I'm saying? We're tired of burying these young men. Listen, I'm telling you, we don't want to preach no more funerals. Listen, I'm tired of waking up in the morning, turning on the news and finding out some 15-year-old, some 16-year-old done got shot out there playing with a gun. He at the schoolhouse with a gun. And I'm saying to myself, where are the fathers?
Thank you for tuning into the Pastor Finkley podcast. It is our prayer that this podcast has brought a great level of spiritual enrichment into your life. And until we get the opportunity to get together again, continue to walk in the blessings of God.